Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be our first ACT English Concepts video covering all of the key concepts in the English section. As always, if you find it helpful, leave a like, subscribe if you want to help the channel out, see when I post new videos or help others find the channel, and comment with anything you like, so that way I make sure I do more of that, any questions you might have, or anything you'd like to see. But let's start out with apostrophes. And specifically, I'm going to begin with contractions, because apostrophes can be used to indicate either contractions or possession. So I'm going to start with the first one. A contraction is just when two words are pushed together. And that apostrophe is just going to indicate where those letters were cut out in the contraction. So an example of that is the word it's. So that is short for the two words it is being pushed together, but we got rid of the letter I. And where that I should be is where we put the apostrophe. Now keep in mind, because this is the English language and there's lots of similar words out there, if a contraction form of a word exists, then that's what the apostrophe is going to be used for, the contraction. In these cases, there's going to be another form of the word with no apostrophe, and that's going to be the version for possession, if possession makes sense for that. An example of that is whose. So because whose is a contraction, meaning who is, then there's this version here, whose without an apostrophe, that is used for possession. Here's another example, their, which is short for they are. So a contraction form exists, so there has to be a different version of the word with no apostrophe, so you get there with EIR, that is used for possession. So in short, if there ever is a contraction form of the word, then do not use the apostrophe version for possession, because that will be the contraction. So now let's go talk about possession. If no contraction form of the word exists, then the apostrophe is used to indicate possession. So you're going to have either apostrophe S or S apostrophe, depending on whether or not the thing that owns something is singular or plural. Note, it's not about what they're owning being singular or plural, but who's actually owning it. So, if it's singular, you have apostrophe S. So here's an example. Let's say I own one dog. So I need to pick up my dog's toys. So I have a dog here that is possessing or owns the toys. It is one dog that I'm talking about, so I need apostrophe S, because it's singular. It doesn't matter that its toys are plural. All that matters is, am I talking about one dog or two? Also notice dogs does not have a contraction form. There's no contraction for dog is. So in this case, the apostrophe is used for possession. Now let's look at the same sentence with the example saying, now I own two dogs. So when I'm talking about my dog's toys, I'm talking about toys that they both own. So in this case, I'm talking about plural dogs. There's still no contraction of this, so the apostrophe is used for possession. But since I'm talking about multiple dogs owning the toys, now the apostrophe is going to go after the S. So again, I want to point out, it doesn't matter if the thing being owned, the toys in this case, is singular or plural. All that matters is whoever is doing the owning, whether that is singular or plural. So again, keep in mind that plural words without possession are not going to have an apostrophe. So if I look at this sentence here, I own two dogs, there's no apostrophe here at all, because there's no possession going on, there's no contraction going on. I'm just talking about a plural word with two dogs here. So you will often see answer choices that have apostrophes and then some that don't, and really it's just a plural word, so you don't need an apostrophe at all. So don't just immediately jump to an apostrophe. Do think about it. So let's go over a few of the most commonly tested contraction, beginning with its. So its with no apostrophe is possession, because remember, if a contraction form of a word exists, then no apostrophe versions are used for possession. So the example here, the tree lost its leaves. So the tree possesses the leaves. Its with no apostrophe is the correct choice. Then there's its with apostrophe S, which is the contraction form, it is. So it is time to start studying. The contraction is its with the apostrophe S. Now, you will see this as an answer choice. It's with an S and then the apostrophe. Never choose this. It is not a thing. It is a trick answer. So next, let's go to there, and there. So THERE is not possession or a contraction, it's just a location. So I left my calculator on the table over there. Next we have the contraction, there with apostrophe RE. That is the contraction for they are, with the apostrophe indicating I took out the letter A. So let the contractors do the job. They're the professionals. They are the professionals. Then the third version is there, EIR. This one is possession. The students all aced their test. So again, because a contraction form of this word exists, I need one of the ones that doesn't have an apostrophe to be used for possession. And in this case, there's two, so they just completely change the spelling. So knowing which is very important. Now let's go look at would've, could've, and should've. So these don't have possession, but they do like to test these because they are all contractions for would have, could have, and should have. What you're going to see is the option would of, could of, and should of. Because if you read this out loud, would have sounds like would of, could have sounds like could of, and should have sounds like should of. That's not actually what it means, because remember, it's a contraction. So that apostrophe is indicating I just took some letters out. So in this case of should have, I took out HA. I still have a VE. Of doesn't have a VE. So that's a good way to help remember that. So never choose would have, could have, or should have, because that is not what these stand for. So now let's go to a new question type, conciseness, which is just a word that means keeping things short. So how do I identify that this is what they're testing? Well, you're going to see repetitive answer choices, with one of them being much shorter than the others. So they're all saying the same thing, but one is just a lot shorter. Also, now that we have the new version of the test, you're probably going to have a question prompt along the lines of which choice is least redundant in context. But do keep in mind, even for other question types, if you see answer choices like this, lean towards the shorter one if it is still answering the question properly and is grammatically okay. So, how do I get the answer here? You're generally just want to go with the fewest number of words needed. So just the shortest one. However, avoid being vague. So if you just see something like stuff or things in your answer choice, while it might be the shortest, it's not the right answer. You don't want to go with that. If you do have a vague answer like that being the most concise, at that point, switch gears and go with whatever is the most specific, because that's going to override the conciseness. Now, in this new test, at this point, they're probably going to have a new prompt, so what might look like conciseness, instead of asking which choice is least redundant, they might ask which of the following is the most clear, or gives the most precise information. So that's the nice thing with the new test, is you're going to have a better idea of what they're actually looking for. But keyword, never go with a vague answer. That's almost never going to be correct. Another thing to keep in mind is if one of your longer answers seems like it has important information. So you're looking at it like, yeah, it's not the shortest one, but I think that information it's telling me in the extra stuff is actually really important. Stop and think for a bit. A, they're not asking for something that's important. They just want it to not be redundant, or they want it to be short. So it probably doesn't matter. But if you really can't get over it, go back and look in the passage earlier. So maybe an earlier sentence, maybe earlier in the sentence, or earlier in a different paragraph. There's a good chance they already told you that, and they're actually just repeating it, hence becoming redundant. So you still want to get rid of it. So let's look at an example. Several paintings can be found at more than a small number of places in museums that celebrate historical periods ranging from 1500 to 1600. That is a mouthful, so before I even get to the question, I can tell you this is a conciseness problem. And there we are, which choice is least redundant in context? So right off the bat, I'm going to go straight at D, because that one is clearly the shortest. So I want to read it, plug it in, and see is it grammatically okay, and is it too vague? So several paintings can be found at several museums showcasing paintings from the 1500s. That makes perfect sense. It's not too vague, other than the fact that it's not telling me what type of paintings it is or what type of museums or which specific ones, but none of my answer choices are telling me that, so it doesn't matter. So my answer is D, because it's the shortest and it's not vague. So the last question type I want to go to is the objective question type. Now, before the 2025 changes, these were very easy to identify because they were one of the only ones that started out with which of the following, or which choice best, or given that all the following are accurate, which answer choice something. Because it used to be all the other question types didn't even have a question, it was just answer choices, and you had to figure out what they wanted. It's a little bit harder now to identify these and what I'm talking about. So you're still going to see this for every single question type, but for these that I'm talking about, it's going to be followed by an objective that's generally just not related to punctuation or grammar rules. So that one we were just looking at for conciseness, where they say which one is least redundant, well, that's a grammar rule. But if they ask us something just kind of off the ballpark, just really strange, that's an objective question. So if you see something like that, just know we only care about accomplishing the stated objective. So whatever the question wants us to do, we want to do that. The good news is technically, since we have this question kind of structure for every question, this is actually true for everything. So you can actually treat every question in the ACT like the objective type now, where you really, really want to read carefully and make sure you accomplish whatever the stated objective is. So that's all kind of confusing until I give you an example. So here we are. Which of the following best indicates the arrangement of the trees? If you see this question, now notice I didn't even give you the sentence in the paragraph because it doesn't matter. Because here, which of the following best indicates, so which of the following best, that's kind of my giveaway, although you're probably going to see that now. This is the objective. What do they want my answer to do? Indicate the arrangement of the trees. So if I look through these, if I see the giant green trees, do I know how they are arranged? No, I do not. I know they're big and I know what color they are. How about B, the rows of trees? That tells me the arrangement. I know that I have rows now, so that's probably my answer. Let's look at the others. C, the ancient fruit trees. I know their age now. I know nothing about the arrangement. The objective is the arrangement. D, the fruit trees and the ornamental trees. I know more about what type of trees, but again, I do not accomplish the objective of indicating the arrangement. So my answer is B. It is the only one that actually accomplishes the objective. So just make sure that you're following this approach for every question in the ACT English section. Now, whatever they want your answer to do, just make sure that it actually does that. And there's still going to be some of these that just seem totally random, because obviously indicating the arrangement of something has nothing to do with a grammar rule or a punctuation rule, but they just want you to make sure that you can pay attention and accomplish what they want you to do. So that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Good luck on your studying, and I'll see you on the next one.